Okay, so in the past I had made some setup videos regarding my Kyosho ZX6. Well, two of them, one for AstroTurf and one for dirt. But those setup videos were kind of generalized, like what shock oil am I running and maybe a few little changes that I made to the stock setup. But I realized that over time, I've made enough changes to get the car tuned in to how I want it to behave that it would be worth actually putting together, a full-on setup sheet for the Lazer. So this here is my ZX6 that I run on dirt. This is not the 6.6, this is the standard ZX6.0, if you will. So I'm going to go through the full setup sheet here for my dirt setup. And this is for Walkett Hobbies and Raceway in Connecticut. That particular track is kind of, I'd say, a medium grip, relatively smooth track. Some would characterize it as low grip. It really depends on the temperature of the track and how you treat your tires. So I don't use any traction compound. I just run it as is. If anything, I might use a little bit of some warm water and maybe some Simple Green. But even then, I find that I have better grip when I just keep the track dirt on the tires as is. And as the tires wear in and as the track wears in, I get more grip. So I'll start with the tires. So I mentioned that. The other thing is I run M4 electrons, front and rear. And a lot of people at Walkett run primes. And then they put traction compound on the primes, and that works very well for them. I prefer to run electrons because, at least when you mount electrons and you don't do anything special to them, they have a flatter tire profile, a flatter carcass than primes. Primes are a bit more rounded. So you have to kind of wear the primes in a little bit to soften up the inserts to get the primes to flatten out. With electrons, you don't have that problem. The only problem with electrons on that track is usually you end up with lower grip than if you were running primes, especially with traction compound. If they do a brand new layout, then I'll run fresh electrons, because on a brand new layout the dirt's not worn in yet, so it's a little dustier. Electrons tend to work better. But as the layout gets kind of worn down or beaten in over time, there's very little dust buildup, and so a slick tire gives you a lot better grip. But by that time, the electrons have already worn down, at least at the center tread, and I have plenty of grip with worn electrons on that track. Okay, so enough rambling about the tires. So let's talk about the front suspension here. Shock position on the tower is on the third hole from the inside. Okay. This here is the older 3-hole tower. The new towers have 4 holes, a 4th hole on the outside. I don't use that. I use this 3rd hole here. Okay. On the camber link, I'm running on the inside position here. Okay. With a 1mm spacer under the ball stud there. I'm running 1 degree of camber. And on the caster block, I'm running on the outside hole here with 0mm of spacer. Okay, so this drops the roll center a little bit, this and this spacer combined. It's 10 degree caster block, 0mm of bump steer spacers. Okay, as we can see here, where is it? Here, 0mm bump steer. Let's see, we'll go one thing at a time here. The shock position on the arm is on the middle hole. Okay. I have 2mm of spacers on the Ackerman plate, or the cross member here on the steering rack, as you can see. Alright, and also for the axle height spacer, I put that spacer on the bottom. Okay. As far as the wheelbase goes, this wheelbase on the front is adjusted on the inside, on the inner hinge pin, and I have 1mm spacer on the front, 0 in the rear. For the inserts, the front insert is D in, and the rear insert is B in. So what this will do is give the car a little bit of forward arm sweep, and I do that to help lift the nose a little bit approaching jump faces on power to help keep the nose from dragging. Okay, and I have a 0.5 millimeter spacer under the rear hinge pin holder and 1 millimeter spacer under the front hinge pin holder. So that increases the kick up just a little bit. It'll also increase the static camber a little bit beyond the 10 degrees you nominally get. I think stock is 0.5 millimeter here. I haven't actually measured the toe in, but I can say that the left and right steering links measured from the inside to the inside here is respectively 26.5 and 26.8 millimeters. Okay, ball diffs front and rear. I don't know what it means here by slipper type, direct or separate. I just have the standard slipper clutch there. Okay, for the rear suspension, flip this around. What do we got here? Shock tower mounting position is again on hole 3. Okay, and let's see, we'll move along here for the inner camber link ball stud. That's on the inside hole, so that's hole 1 with 0 millimeters of spacer under it. Okay, and then for the arm, I'm running the gullwing arm, so that's the UM713 part number with hole 1. That hole is the most on the inside. Okay, and let's see. Okay, 1 degree camber on the actual hub carrier here. This is the aluminum 0 degree hub carrier. It's just what came with the car when I got it. I bought this used, and it came with that. And that has all 4 holes on it. I'm using the outside hole there and the inside hole on the inside here. So this is minimum camber gain, maximum camber length. Okay, and that should help the car give me more forward traction, especially on corner exit. That tends to be a problem that I have on this particular surface sometimes. 2 millimeter spacer under this ball stud here. For this ball stud, I have, where is it? 0 millimeter spacer. Okay, so again, lower roll center. Sorry, higher roll center in the rear, not lower. I did this because I originally had, I think, 2 millimeters on the inside and 0 on the outside, and the car was rolling way too much, and mid-corner it was basically spinning out, so I had to flip it around to help reduce chassis roll. As far as the wheelbase goes for the hub carrier mounting, it's basically in the middle, 2 millimeters in front of and behind the hub carrier. Okay, by the way, for the sway bars, I have the 1.4 millimeter yellow sway bar in the rear and the white 1.0 millimeter sway bar up front. Okay, for the inserts, very, very different setup than the front. I have E in and F out. So this gives me almost the maximum amount of rear toe-in. The only way to get more toe-in would be to go to F in. Okay, so this is almost the maximum amount. And I think the stock setup was something like D in, or maybe B in. But I found that, I had too much steering, so I had to, try to take some of the steering out and also try to get a little bit more forward bite, especially in the rear of the car. So doing this really helped with stability. And I'm also running basically 0 degrees anti-squat, so 1 millimeter each under the front and rear inner hinge pin holders. The wing stay position is in the stock mounting position, which is the middle hole there. I didn't change that at all. Okay. Going to the shocks, running 2 by 1.6 millimeter pistons front and rear, 40 weight front oil, 32.5 weight rear oil. I usually use Team Associated oil, but I also use low-C oil once in a while. So I think right now I have 40 weight low-C oil in the front and 32.5 weight Associated oil in the rear. I know there's a little bit of a difference in weight between the low-C and the Associated oil. I don't know I don't remember which direction it goes in, but personally I don't notice too much of a difference. So you could do 40 weight Associated oil, and and it should be about the same. Front springs, low-C blue front spring. That's around 3.8 rate, I think. And Kyosho gold rear springs. No limiters in the front shocks, inside or outside. No limiters on the inside of the rear shock, but I have about 7 millimeters of up travel limiter on the outside. It's not exactly 7 because I'm using the RPM shock travel limiters, and those I think are actually measured in standard units and not metric units, but it's approximately 7 millimeters. The shock length is 19 millimeters up front and 22.5 in the rear, and I use the medium shock end at the bottom of the shock. 23 millimeter ride height front and rear. Let's see, I already went over the tires. Running, as you can see here, quite obviously, motor in the rear, shorty pack, and the servo is on the left side of the chassis, going laterally across the chassis. Okay. All the electronics in here are Turnigy Trackstar electronics, and I'm quite pleased with them. I have a Trackstar 6.5 turn motor, basically running stock on no added timing. It's at the 0 degree timing setting there on the end bell. Okay. 18 tooth pinion, 78 tooth spur, running the Trackstar 120 amp Gen 2 speed control. That's probably one of my favorite speed controls on the market. It's about $70, and it has almost as much adjustability as something like a Novak Pulse. The only thing you can't change on it, if I remember correctly, is the throttle and brake frequency. I could be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure that's the only thing you cannot adjust. Very good speed control, good brakes, smooth throttle, everything, perfect. I'm also running the Trackstar TS920 servo. These servos tend to be a little bit longer than a corresponding, say, a high-tech servo or a Savox servo. So depending on the chassis you mount them in, you may run into mounting issues. On the Lazer, since there's open space behind the servo, it's not a problem to mount this. But if you're trying to run this in, say, like a B5, B5M, a B6, where the servo kind of slots into sort of a compartment, and then the chassis kind of molds up behind the back of the servo, you may find the Trackstar servos just don't fit. They're too long. Okay, but on a chassis like this, they fit just fine, no problem. Let's see, that's pretty much it. I would say that the rear ball diff is a little bit looser than the front. I run the front a little tighter than the rear, again, to try to take out a little bit of steering. So far, this setup I'm very happy with. I've spent a fair amount of time with whatever opportunities I had to go to Walkit to play around with the setup, and this is something I'm very comfortable with on the track. It jumps great, lands great, handles very nicely, so you can take low speed sharp corners competently. It doesn't have too much like high speed steering, so you're not going to spin out in high speed corners. It has plenty of grip coming out of corners. The low anti-squat on a smooth track, and the high rear toe-in really helps with that. So this is where I am with my dirt setup. I don't unfortunately have any running videos of the Lazer with this specific setup, but maybe I will soon, and if so, I will of course post that. Okay, I do plan on making the same kind of a setup sheet and video for my AstroTurf setup with my other Lazer, so in time I'll go over that. Okay, thanks for watching.